Welcome to another episode of the Career Keynotes podcast with Tincup and Gardiner, where William and Andrew chop it up with respected Silicon Valley talent acquisition and HR leaders to get the real story behind their career journeys, along with an insider's view of how companies engage with candidates. Let's face it, these days, finding the job, much less nailing down an interview, is not easy. This is a rare opportunity to learn firsthand what companies are looking for in a candidate and the best ways to engage with them. And now, here are William and Andrew.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to another episode of Career Keynotes. I'm here with William Tincup, producer Bev, and a very special guest who I'm very excited to have on the show, and that's Joe Strongone. Before I even say anything, I always want to say Joe let me mispronounce his name for the first 2 years that I was chasing after him, and was so gracious and polite to not call it out. So I'm
Joe,
his answer was, well, you mispronounced it the best of anybody.
Hey, have you done the bit on LinkedIn on the mobile part of LinkedIn where it has a pronunciation thing that you can actually go in and click and then record the pronunciation of your name?
Oh, I had no idea.
Oh yeah, just on the mobile version.
Awesome.
So you can do it there. And of course I went in and recorded something completely inappropriate, but because exactly, it's an IQ test. Like if you really need me to tell you how to say Tincup, but yeah,
I do get an occasional Gardiner.
Nice. That's church stuff.
But yeah, it's just Gardiner. Okay, so listen. Without further ado. So Joe, first of all, thanks again for making time to come on the show. Super excited to have you. I know who you are. I know what you've done, and I can blather on, but it'd probably be best if you could just take a few minutes and tell the audience who you are. You don't have to build a spaceship, but just context of who you are and what you do. And so we can orient the audience to you.
All right, great. Yeah, great. In general, talent acquisition has been my primary career and focus. Although I've dabbled in other parts of the organization, I was a consultant in internet commerce and went into an HR business partner role and compensation and so forth, just so that I could learn and be in other people's shoes. But I kept my focus and my aspiration was always in talent acquisition, because I truly believe that it is the most impactful role in any company. Maybe we're biased because we're in talent acquisition, but I really believe that we make the biggest impact. Started my career in talent acquisition back in the 90s. Just like everybody else, it fell into my lap. But not completely, because others saw potential in what I was doing, and some of my skills apparently were transferable from other careers that I had. And someone tapped me and said, "You want to recruit?" I said, "What the heck is recruit?" They basically said, "Well, you have 600 people, 600 distributors in your ecosystem. Who put those in place?" I said, "I did." They said, "Well, that's what recruiting is." So this one particular person said, "Well, have you ever recruited in high tech?" I said, I really don't even have a clue what even high tech is. At that time, I hadn't even had a computer. Believe it or not, I did all of my commerce through phone and kind of the old-fashioned way. And so that may date myself, but for the 1990s, I was probably at least 10 years behind most people in technology. So I decided to take that leap of faith and go on the dark side, go internal, and just start recruiting. Today, if we advance, started from an individual contributor to then many leadership positions, and as I mentioned before, had some experiences in other parts of HR and the business. And then we fast forward to just maybe the last couple of years where I've had experience in very high, rapid growth companies. In fact, my last company, when I joined them, they were about 800 million in revenue. and about 2,400 employees. 4 years later, we were close to 8,000 employees and over 3.5 billion in revenue. So we had to scale up pretty quickly, and that was an awesome experience for me. And I joined a company recently, about a year and a half ago, called New Relic, which has a very similar story. Our growth is not quite as rapid, but we're setting up for scale. And we're going to see some rapid growth here in the coming 6 to 12 months, and lead a team of really talented people across the globe whose main purpose is to attract and scour the ends of the earth to find those superheroes, those that have super skills that can create a more perfect internet for New Relic.
I love it. Love it. One of the things I want to ask you about, and this is probably through your career, but I'll pick on Palo Alto Networks. There's a perception of Pan that really, really, really super smart people work there. And I believe the perception is true, right?
Yeah.
So if true, how do you recruit really, really both driven, but really, really, really high EQ and IQ folks?
Yeah, I would say that the organization is a blend of the EQ and IQ.
Right.
But more so because the focus was on quality, right? And in every conversation we had, either with the board, with the executives, with anybody in talent acquisition, the focus was quality over speed. And I think that most companies focus and over rotate on speed. And it's really unfortunate because, one, I believe that you miss out on the best person and you miss out on diversity, because typically speed comes in with either you've already pre-identified a pipeline or you have employee referrals, right? If you look at the speed of hire through employee referrals, is much shorter than it is direct sourcing or other methods. But then the organization all looks the same over time. I'm not sure if that's the right strategy or not. So the magic sauce there was that I had, over time, first of all, I started with about 2,700 recruiters, which was the employee population.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, wow.
We turned every single person into a recruiter. It was a recruiting organization, right? The culture was embedded in recruiting. Later to over 7,000. So that was really, it wasn't necessarily my doing, but it was the keen partnership that we had with every single executive. They had the 3 R's that they focused on. One was recruit, revenue, and retain.
Oh, genius.
And literally every single conversation we had in every single executive staff meeting, what number 1 was the recruit. Number 2 was about the business. And number 3 was about the people, like retaining and developing the people. I'm not sure if that's the case today, but until the last day there, that was always the focus. I give credit to one of my mentors, probably the best CEO that I've ever reported to, which is, his name is Mark McLaughlin, who ran Palo Alto Networks, now is on the board. Close second. And Lou, I apologize if you're listening to this, but it's Lou Cerny, who is our current CEO at New Relic, who I respect both, and they have a keen focus on recruiting, talent acquisition.
God, I thought for a second you were going to say my name, and I was like, oh,
Andrew, you're probably a third.
I'm kidding. Okay, Joe, you made I just want to go back to something you said earlier, which I think is very, very important, and it's a key distinction. Something I see a lot of is, hey, we've got to hire 1,000 people yesterday, and I don't know how you do that without compromising quality. And my experience in working with and for people like you is, you're always someone always has their foot on your throat. Like, we need to hire these people. Where are these people? You got to do this. And then maybe a week later, they move the goalposts and they're over here. And then we need to do this. We need to do that. So, and the other thing, just before you answer, I think the other thing that goes often unnoticed or unrecognized is of the trifecta of HR responsibilities, comp and benefits, training and development, and recruiting. Recruiting is by far the hardest. By far, I think the most important. And to your point, one of the key, it provides the biggest lift and one of the key attributes of success of any company. So what is your secret to navigating that and keeping senior leadership happy, but at the same time putting the butts in the seat? And oh, by the way, the butts are smart, high quality butts.
Yeah, there are times when you need to pivot and react to go hire those 1,000 people. But any smart colleague of mine in the industry is going to look to influence a multi-pronged approach, because recruiting can't do it all. Right? There's just no possible way you can hire 1,000 people within relatively short amount of time without workforce planning. I remember, William, in your HCI discussion and presentation you did, you said that companies they suck at workforce planning. There's no such thing. I can say that the companies that have workforce planning, or at least get closer to a more predictive sort of a approach, are the ones that really scale and add probably the most tremendous value to the shareholders. At Palo Alto Networks, that was probably one of the first companies where we had a 1-year demand plan. We had laid out quarter over quarter, and we smooth. So you have two different decisions you need to make. You either outsource and you whatever it takes to hire everybody at one time, which actually slows down the machine.
Agreed.
When you overload the machine, you're gonna make mistakes.
Yep.
Or the other is you smooth out your quarters, and you based on the capacity of the recruiting engine.
Right. It's a conveyor belt.
Exactly. So they were masters, and I didn't have a lot of influence in putting that model in place. When I joined, some of my direct reports had influenced that outcome. I just made it better. And so they were masters, and we literally had almost rec by rec, role by role, 1 year in advance. Now it altered, shifted a little bit, but it was directionally correct. So the multi-pronged approach is, if you need to do that in a shorter period of time, one, you need to look at your internal capability in the team, meaning that what are the resources that the company has internally? And this has been a discussion for just decades. I don't think that companies do that well now. They don't assess the current talent because we only view the individuals based on the role that they have today versus the experiences that they had before. And so if you want to scale quickly, you need to do a quick inventory and treat those individuals as an external talent pool. The other is, why not focus on acquisitions? And then, meanwhile, in parallel, you look at how do you scale your talent in your recruiting organization. Currently, we're in some of those discussions. We're planning on scale, major investment, looking at our capacity. The good news is our finance partners, or HR business partners, or business partners are very in tune to my team's quota and their output. And so they're never going to make decisions without talent acquisition being at the table, because they know that we're a major stakeholder. And that's a big differentiator, because what happens to most of my peers, they're reactive.
Yep.
And then they got to try to solve for it. For us here, we've influenced, and I've influenced, that the company looks at their planning process 6 months in advance. So for example, we're in the third quarter. We are now start having the discussions with each functional unit about their budgets, about their strategy, and what are the people that they need. And we're at the seat of the table in all of those discussions. So it puts us at a much bigger advantage, much greater advantage than most companies. So that's how we're able to really scale and make some of those compromises, right? And so there are some units that we don't quite have the capability and capacity. So we're looking at that multi-pronged approach, right? How do we either invest more in talent acquisition? How do we do things differently? How do we tap talent internally? And potentially, who do we acquire?
I love this. Well, one of the things about workforce planning for the audience is it's a combination of operations, finance, HR, TA. If you have those folks all kind of working in concert with one another, you can do what you've done both at Pan and New Relic.
Yes.
And for folks at home, typically when you're thinking of this, you're thinking of it as a rolling 1 year or rolling 6 months. So it's not, so in your mind, it's not like calendar year so far as it is, you look at a quarter, and then when that quarter, on 4 quarters later, when that one's done, you sunset that one and you move to the next one. So it's a rolling, the ones I've seen at least, they're rolling as they go. But I have seen it done well, but by and large, what I said on stage at HCI was appropriate. I want to know about, because you've got some secret. Well, you've got a lot of secrets, let's be honest. But all right, you got some secret. Yeah, exactly. You've got a secret of working with hiring managers, or you've figured out how to work with divisional, departmental, heads of these areas around hiring.
Yeah.
What's your hiring manager whisperer advice to folks?
It's mainly an attitude. It's how you view your organization. If you view talent acquisition as an expense versus an investment, where you look at it as a support function versus a strategic part of the organization, arm and pillar of the organization, that's really the difference. I've always viewed talent acquisition as a pure sales organization. We have quotas for the recruiters. We have weekly commit calls. Recruiters are committing to not only when they hire the person, but the start date. Because the business doesn't care about when you've closed the rack. What they care about is when the person is going to start ramping. We look at linearity. We look at ARR. Our ARRs basically are candidate retention. It's our employee retention. So if you're not speaking the language of the business and you don't have a model set up like the business, then you probably don't have a lot of credibility. And so you're always going to be one step behind, versus when you've mirrored what the sales organization does, they see similarities. They understand that, wow, okay, I can't put that much pressure on Joe's organization because if he lost a recruiter, there's a ramp up time, just like sales, right? So we have a 6-month ramp up time by the time I have to open up a recruiter role, the time that they're fully productive. So the business understands that. And also financially, we model it that way. And also when the business when there's unexpected hiring, which happens sometimes, the business invests, right? There's a formula that we've set aside that for every hire, there should be this much investment going into talent acquisition.
Dude, I'm bummed. I think the audience is going to be bummed because I was hoping to do this in 20 minutes, and I think we might be going longer here. Because no, seriously, these are really good questions and even better answers. So I want to go back to something you said earlier, because I happen to agree with you, and obviously, sensibility-wise, it makes complete sense. A lot of times I see companies being reactive. They're reacting, they're not responding. So the workforce planning part I get. I think one of the things that makes a really successful talent acquisition leader is getting, I'm never not amazed when a company's like, well, it's just HR, just do it. Here's $5, go do it. And it's like, what about, it's all about the people. It's all about the, and so navigating that, that perception from just do it and react to it, to being out in front of it. And here's what we need. And and getting TA, because you're one thing you've been very consistent about since I've known you, and this even during this podcast, is the emphasis, the importance, the of talent acquisition, and have it be treated with dignity and respect. And that's not always reflected in the way senior leadership or senior management approaches it. So what is your secret or your strategy? So how do you navigate and kind of get that? It's usually somewhere in the middle. But if TA is reporting into finance or legal, it just never goes well. Whereas if you're working right with the CEO shoulder to shoulder, and you've already said, hey, I'm working with some really bright people that really understand my challenge and are supporting me and getting that done. So what is your strategy around getting that consensus and buy-in in a way that's, a win-win and not a struggle? Because you've done it a couple of times, several times for all.
Yeah, and let me clarify too that what I'm stating is probably best case scenarios. That there are times when it's a struggle.
Oh, yeah.
When you have a new executive come into the organization and they're used to a certain way of doing things, the first mistake most people do is say, "Here's how we do things here." Right? Because they're gonna really put their heels down. Versus, tell me what good looks like to you. And I don't try to share with them data. I don't try to convince them otherwise. I listen because you get a lot out of listening. But I let others promote recruiting. We rarely promote ourselves, and I focus on the willing. But also, when you have your CEO and your CHRO and some of the other executives behind you, and then the executive wants to do something different, they're going to have the conversation with them because there's a proven way that we do something. But I think part of it is also the continuity of the team makes a really big difference. Some of my peers tend to have a lot of turnover in recruiters, and we have recruiters at New Relic, and same thing with Palo Alto Networks. Back to Palo Alto Networks, the most of the team is still intact that we hired, 4.5 years ago, and that's been part of their secret to success. But other than that, I really don't think that I have a magic formula, with the exception of it's a strategic part of the function. That's right. It sort of sells itself. Obviously, you have to demonstrate results. And there are times when some of the recruiters don't meet the expectation, and we'll flex accordingly. But consensus is not a strategy for me.
Right.
Because the minute you try consensus, you will never you'll never move the needle. It should be about empowerment and trusting the individual, even if someone you think is making a wrong mistake. Support them, help them succeed, versus stand back and prove yourself right. And so I think it's just a difference in attitude. We're not a consensus organization. Neither was New Relic. Palo Alto Networks. Managers were highly empowered to make the hiring decisions, and recruiters had the veto if we felt that there was not a good hire, or if the pipeline wasn't diverse. We could actually crank that up all the way to the CEO, and the CEO would get involved every single time, even when the organization was 5,000 employees. The CEO still got involved. That's not only that, the CEO would have monthly group sessions with talent acquisition. Again, strategic organization, just like sales, just like other parts of G&A, just like product and engineering.
Yeah. You're describing what I think what's going to be wonderful when the audience sees this and hears this is you're describing how talent acquisition should be done, and you've actually been able to live it, which is fantastic. And it's a peer relationship, and again, you kind of brought it into. You got to know the business. You got to be able to talk. You got to be able to do these things, and you got to be able to produce all that stuff.
Yeah.
But I think people will look at this idyllically and say, oh my God, I would love to be able to have not a subservient relationship to either HR or to the C-suite, but more of an input. So
Yeah.
I love that. I want to get your take on employee referrals because you mentioned it earlier. And I'll start with, I have a bit on employee referrals that I'd like for you to destroy. So my bit is, when people tell me about employee referrals, I'm like, yeah, you don't really want all of employee referrals. And the bit goes like, if it's an A-teamer, yeah, I want that. I want that referral. But if a C-teamer gives me a referral, yeah, I'm not really keen to engage in that conversation. So it goes along with A talent will refer in other A talent, B, C, D, F talent won't. Or if they do, and you might end up with a Peter principle. And so that's my bit. So destroy that, and then give us your take on employee referrals.
Yeah. So I think there is a point in time in the company's evolution where employee referrals are more important than other times. I think in the very beginning phases of the company, especially if you're, startup, I think employee referrals, that network is probably very, very relevant. But I don't think that it scales very, very well. In fact, it sometimes can create the environment that you don't want.
Right. Homogeneity.
And I've done quite a few tests over time. First of all, I don't believe that employees should be compensated for a referral. It's your job.
Yeah. Just like a referral for a sale.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it should be your responsibility to attract and bring on some really good colleagues to improve the customer experience, evolve the internal culture of the organization, retain customers. So to me, it's never computed that you get rewarded for that. What was interesting is one company, I won't mention the company's name, but when I started the company, 70% of the source of hire was employee referrals. And what was interesting, we were trying to see some really interesting behavior. Not only that, the whole sales organization kind of looked like me, gray-haired, white, male. And that was predominantly because 70% of referrals were for 70% of the hires were employee referrals. So and some of the referrals were up to 15,000. And I thought that was ridiculous. So we decided that we're no longer going to promote employee referrals. And the toughest decision that I made, and I was probably hated for several months, we reduced the employee referral down to, I think it was like $500. And the average was, I believe, 4,000 at the time. Did you know that the employee referral rate never changed?
Oh no, that's cool.
Never changed.
Yeah.
Though over time, the employee referral rate went down from the 70s to the 40s.
Right.
And the employee engagement increased by 20 points. Here's the other thing, is at a company, we used internal surveys. We did, pulse surveys to gauge how committed and engaged individuals are. And we would extract that data and we parse it out into 3 categories. Employees that were hired from an agency or third party, employees that were hired through employee referrals, and those that were sourced directly from recruiters. Which one do you think had the highest engagement level?
I'm going to go with third party.
I'm going to go with the ones that you sourced organically.
That's it. Andrew is correct. By far, employees that were sourced directly from the recruiting team, not employee referrals, or coming through a third party or agency, had the highest level in engagement. 12 points away was employee referrals, and 40 points away was those that were either contract to full-time conversions or that came from agencies.
So
I wasn't just wrong. I was way wrong.
no,
That's
but
what I learned.
that's listen, we the whole point that we're not going to always get it right. That's
Right.
why,
Right.
that's why Joe's the expert. But
Yeah.
so I have
I don't discount it. I think it's great because listen, I hardest thing that I try to not do is hire people I know, because it's such a natural instinct, and if I want to continue to learn, I need to hire people that I've never worked for before. One is because they can bring in innovative, different ideas. It helps me refine my leadership and management style, and also from a diversity perspective, right? Diversity of company, diversity of the way we look, ethnicity, gender, and so forth. So I think that there's value, but I think that most companies over-rotate.
So I kind of wish you'd asked me that question, William, but to be fair, Joe's the guest, because I have a whole rap on employee referrals. So you're right. It's kind of the go-to, good people know good people, but you've already articulated really well some of the pitfalls. You don't want everybody like you. That's one thing that could possibly go wrong. It's like, don't be the smartest person kind of thing. And then, so I love your answer on that, Joe. But the other piece that you and it's if you're listening, this is worth the episode alone, is that, oh, if you refer someone, we're going to give you 10 grand or 5 grand or 20 grand. So the intention or the motivation is skewed, number one. And number two, you're right. If you're really there for and I know we're not in fantasy land, but if for the right reason, you should be doing it because it's a good person. It's going to elevate the company's production or throughput or quality or success. And then last and by no means least, it's not, more often than not, when the research proves, it's not, this is not my opinion. This is data backed factual stuff. It's not the payout. Like when I used to have an ad agency and we would build these amazing, employer referral program. I remember we did one for, oh gosh, who was it? It was Gary Albright. I can't think of the name. Cadence Designs. We would park a speedboat in the breezeway. And so it would be if you refer, then you're in the drawing for the speedboat. And then we'd rotate it into I remember we did a Harley Davidson. And then Gary wanted to do, hey, you're going to remember when you could get a seat on the thing to the moon or to the lunar station? It's like, so back to my point, and I did have one. No, the most successful ERPs were, hey, if you refer someone, we'll give you a $5 carb, straw. They just wanted to be recognized and acknowledged. And oh, by the way, the biggest detriment or liability with a employer referral program is lack of awareness. People didn't know they had one. And if they did have one, you didn't know where they were in the pipeline. But just the little, hey, if you do this really good thing, which is a good thing, we're going to give you movie tickets or something, not the giant speedboat, trip to the moon stuff. So good for you. Okay, so listen, we are burning through this and we spent a lot of time on talent acquisition and that sort of expertise. Joe, anything we're missing? Is there like any sort of big aha, big takeaway? One of the things I always realize is it's a very hard job, first of all. And it's one that's oftentimes overlooked, even though it's so critical to the success. So any big lesson or parable that you would want to share with the listeners or viewers about that you were like, I can't, that if I didn't know what you do or how you do it, they think it's all peaches and cream or puppies and rainbow, whatever metaphor you want to use there. You kind of like, wow, this was one of the hardest things that I learned, or this is one of the like this, when I realized this, it really blew me away. As you look back over the trajectory of the last 10 or 20 years of doing what you do.
Yeah, I think there's two things for talent acquisition leaders going into a new company. The first thing that I believe we think of is, you hired me because the talent acquisition team is probably not operating optimally, and you're going to seek potentially you're going to seek the problems and the negatives and the organization. I guess my philosophical approach has always been, look to always find the best in the people that are there, trust them, and look to manage in versus manage out. In fact, when I started at one company, the CHRO basically said, everyone on your direct team probably needs to be replaced, within the next year, because they can't scale. And 4 years later, that team was still with me. In fact, I probably learned more from them than they learned from me. And so I think, don't discount the current team. The other is, don't discount what people have done before you. I mean, the company is there and can afford to hire you because of the team before you. So it's really important.
Say that again. I don't want to miss that.
Yeah, it's, don't discount the team that's there when you join, because the reason why the company could afford to bring you on is because of all the hard work and all the successes that team already, did. And it was the same thing here with New Relic. Although I knew I was joining a really, phenomenal team, I have trust in my team. I don't always agree with them. I have to say, sometimes I have to sort of swallow my pride. But I'm really honest with them that I don't agree with you. Here are the reasons why, but I trust you, and I'll do whatever it takes to prove myself wrong, as I mentioned before, and help you succeed. And I think that's what people need, today. And that's, I think, how leaders are born. And I'm not saying leader as in managing lots of people, because I think everyone has leadership attributes. Everyone can be an individual contributor, can be a leader. So I think that would be, that's probably one of my strongest, I think, attributes. The rest, I have a lot of weaknesses, and I continually seek what those weaknesses are, and I do gut checks with my team. You probably think that they were super, super formal. They're usually not. So
it's funny, your first 100 days, this is advice that I've talked to a lot of HR people around, not as much TA, is just listen. Like,
yes.
Just, instead of having this really well articulated plan of what you're going to change, go and just listen. Go and talk to everybody and do more active listening. And I love your approach of looking at the positives rather than looking for what's broken. Yeah, you'll find the stuff that's broken. That's inevitable.
Yeah, there's always broken.
Yeah, yes. Of course. I have some advice questions, but before I get to that, I got to get back to something around quality of hire, because I want to get your take on it.
Yeah.
Again, it's pretty simple. What is your take on quality of hire? Like, because we banter about it a lot, on the internet, and how we measure it and how important it's measurement. But just what's your take on quality of hire?
First of all, it's an overused term. and I don't know one person that has really defined quality of hire and scaled it in any way. I think everyone has their own, definition. Because I don't know how to solve for that term quality of hire, I typically put in a very good process in, because if your processes can be replicated and it's followed every single time, the likeliness of a good hire is much, much greater.
Right.
So in the last two companies, we've put in some measures, some quality measures, quality gates, that managers or interviewers can't move to the next stage of the recruiting process unless they have done that measure, that protocol very well.
Are you talking about, and just so I'm clear, like more a deeper reference checking and background screening
Absolutely.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that? Okay. All
Yeah. Right. So in I call it license to hire. And it's putting people, managers and interviewers through a process where if they do it continually every single time, the proficiency level goes up. Right. And you're exactly right. For example, we don't start recruiting unless we have a very thorough kickoff. We don't start interviewing unless the hiring manager has had a strategy session around the interview team, the interview questions, what the roles and responsibility, what success looks like in the role, et cetera. Now, saying that we don't, 90% of the time they adhere to that process. There are times where sometimes we skip it for whatever reasons. It may be an executive or sort of a one-off, but we're pretty disciplined because we feel that, how many times have recruiters cut short the hiring managers cut short an intake call? If you're Heidrick and Struggles or Spencer Stewart or any of those large firms, they don't cut that. That's their bread and butter. That's where they get to really understand the culture of the organization, what the manager how the manager thinks, what success looks like, what the sourcing strategy may look like, the different companies that you're going to source from. Why cut that short when you're an internal recruiter? And so we're pretty disciplined in that area. And there's a laundry list to go through. There's a checklist. And because some managers are better at it than others. Frankly, I can't remember the exact question and where we got.
Oh no,
how we got to this piece, but
brother, checks and balances and quality of hire. All right, well,
the quality of hire. Yes, thank you.
Quality. Listen, two things that you've been. I mean, I don't even have to ask you the questions. I was going, what makes you successful, and frankly, it's, as William pointed out, and you mentioned it as well. I always say, you said it a lot better than I do. I always say, hey, they're not bringing Joe in because it's going great. So one's first proclivity, including yours truly, is, okay, where can I start cutting? Where are all the dead bodies, or where's the dead wood? And, and I have watched you do this. I've watched people like you do it, and some do it better than others. And your intention and willingness to, producer Bev always calls it an OODA loop, orient, observe, decide, act. And you are very thoughtful and intentional about how you do that, so you don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. And oh, by the way, that's why you have such a loyal, I mean, if you think about it, that's why your team is so loyal, because you treat them with dignity and respect. And you're not also a pushover. You're not challenging them and looking the other way. So, frankly, that's why you're on the show, Joe. Okay, so listen, you guys, we've got to pivot, because part of the deal, part of the format of the show is for those people that are maybe not just looking to get into talent acquisition or become a talent acquisition leader. Maybe they're new to the job market. Maybe they just got laid off. They're struggling because of COVID. So I'd love to spend a few minutes talking about, because I always joke around, like, Joe, talking to you or seeing you is like, having a cup of coffee with the Loch Ness Monster, because I've seen a picture of you, crossing the stream or whatever. Maybe you popped your head up for a second. And so it's going to be really helpful and valuable for the listeners and the viewers to say, hey, you're going to forget more about how companies engage and hire candidates in the next minute than most of us will ever know. So let's start with a real easy one. As you look over the trajectory, you don't have to go back to the 90s, but what are some of the shifts that you've seen and evolution of how companies are engaging with candidates, not just the active ones, but the passive ones. And then what are some ideas and suggestions you have for people that maybe are frustrated or discouraged because they're not having that, it's not as used to be. I'd mail you my resume and someone would call me back and interview me, and that ship has sailed. That was, as producer Bev likes to say, when God was a kid. Now it's completely different. So what are your thoughts around that, Joe?
So I'm probably going to shoot myself in the foot for saying this because maybe it's
fire away, brother.
Maybe it automatically is a great answer.
Yeah.
So.
Maybe record limiting, right? Maybe in my next job, maybe I'm limiting my next job, but I think we tend to over rotate on technology.
100%.
And what we're losing, and I've learned this from my father-in-law years and years ago, said nothing will ever replace the personal touch and interaction. And I believe that to this day. And so from that perspective, for me personally, nothing has changed. In fact, when when there are certain candidates that are on the fence about joining our organization, and even when it was at Palo Alto Networks, and that's, I give this kudos to Mark McLaughlin and also Lou Cerny here at New Relic. They will actually get on a call to close the candidate.
Wow.
Mark McLaughlin helped me close numerous amounts of recruiters. And so the personal touch makes a real difference. And, that is the first sign of values in action. And what values and actions are is a culture.
There's 3 R's.
Yep. So I don't think that anything from my perspective has changed except for the over rotation, and that we just don't do enough. I know it's not scalable, but we do our best to always do the personal touch.
I love that.
I have to agree with that. But in terms of practical advice, let's pretend that for a second I'm sitting here and I just sent my resume in and I didn't hear back. And I, by the way, I happen to agree with everything you said. Like technology, I mean, if one thing to use it to drive efficiency and give recruiters more time to do that personal touch you just mentioned too, but far too employer, from my perspective, to do that. So in terms of practical advice for someone that's having trouble getting traction, and I'm not saying like, look the person in the eye or return their phone call or send them a thank you note. I mean, what are some real kind of anecdotal, not necessarily, but tactical, strategic insight you could give? Because what's happening here is this is an opportunity for a viewer or a listener to it's you. It's not some black hole. It's Joe. You just heard Joe Strongone say that he cares. He wants you. He wants to see you. He wants to talk to you. He wants to understand you. And that's not always reflected. So how, and I'm not expecting you to part the sea here, Joe, but I mean, so what do you say to someone that so much of the feedback and guidance on career coaching or career, dress for success and sit up straight and, don't, whatever, you know what I'm saying?
John T. Malloy. Was that a John T. Malloy reference?
but you know what I mean, Joe. So go. I'm talking too much.
No, so I'll break this up in 2 parts, and I know that our time is ending here. So this is going to be post you looking for a job, and then once you've decided to look for a job. Because I think it's really important that you're always your best at your current job, and don't make sure that you're not running away from something, but you're running towards something. Okay. There's a term, the grass isn't greener on the other side. I do genuinely believe that is true. I just think that some individuals have a difficult time sort of coping and sort of managing their situation. But be the best at your current job. Always expand your skills by trying new things, meeting new people internally. We tend to always operate in these little silos. Be a part of large or small projects to expose your brand. Always be learning. I know it sounds cliche, right? These are things that we've been sort of teaching for quite some time. Be on committees, and don't always believe that the next company will solve for the reasons you're leaving. If you've made the decision that your values are being compromised, then that may be the trigger in which you decide to leave. But understand that if you're a job seeker, recruiters aren't your gateway to finding your next gig all the time. Because not all companies have a robust recruiting organization and can scale the volume of applicants. It's just true. I don't think it's ever going away. Nothing is going to really solve for that. So you must put your search, just like your career, into your own hands. The ones that, the companies that do have the strategic competitive advantage are likely of having, the ones that have a good talent acquisition organization. It's probably the best indicator of a company to go to. It probably has the strongest culture and making sure that they have, good talent. But regardless, when you're seeking a new job, got to be yourself. Don't act more than what you think you really are. Be your real authentic self. It's okay to admit in an interview that you're not strong in that area. It's okay to say, you know what, I don't have a good answer for that question. It's okay to say, no, I really need to think about that, and I feel like I've been put on the spot. I mean, listen, that's vulnerability. It's really okay to do that, because I think most companies now are hiring people that are very authentic versus jerks. There's a lot of jerks with a lot of egos out there. You also hear that the large majority of people find jobs by networking with people that they know. I'm going to and I think it's like the 65, 70 percentile. I challenge everybody, while you're at your current job today, seek to identify 2 to 3 new contacts every single month that you discovered on your own and that can become advocates for you. And gateway to introducing you to other companies and even other industries. And the simple thing that I've always used, even when I was super, super young, because I was so naive, first thing I asked everybody is, can I just get your advice? I'm struggling with this in my career. I saw you on LinkedIn. You look to be someone that's been successful in their career. I'm not looking for a job. I'm not looking for you to hire me. I really just need advice. You know how many times people actually responded to that? About 80%.
Oh, yeah.
Because people really want to help other people. And if you're really genuine with that, listen, that opens up the door for you. That's a brand new contact you've never known before. And guess what? You can learn a lot of new things. And people remember that too. To say the humbleness goes a long ways.
Listen, I'm having the hardest time. You just said like 3 or 4 really profound, if you're listening, what he just said, I'm going to say it back, that the don't run from, run to, that is such good advice, because it's like people forget that when I go from my old company to my new company, I'm going with me.
Yes.
So that's just brilliant. And then inside of that is, hey, work that job, get good at that, because we do have a tendency to connect with the same people and go to the same restaurants and eat with the same people. And COVID notwithstanding, break out of your comfort zone. that in itself is such good feedback. And you know what? It aligns nicely with what you said earlier. It validates it really about being prepared and thinking in advance. Like you can't just go, okay, I'm looking for a new job. No, you got to feather your nest and have a goal and have a plan and have checks and balances and a direction and a strategy. So, and I'm hogging up. William, producer Bev, you want to ask, because this is I'm kind of running around behind Joe.
I think instead of asking the interview bit, the last thing I'd like to ask Joe is advice that you'd give your younger self. So, and it doesn't have to be, the 10 commandments, but just like if you could impart something to your younger self, what would it be?
Probably more self-reflection. I don't think I knew who I was, as in, when I was an early career. I had a lot of fears. Maybe this is a kind of a male ego thing. Never showed those. Right. I was sort of like invincible. Part of it was my upbringing, because I was sat down in a dark bedroom with my father when he said, it was 8 or 9. I was 9. He said, you are now going to run the finances of the home. You're going to make all critical decisions, and you're going to be acting as the sole kind of proprietor slash, bread earner. And again, it's a very traditional family. And at 8 or 9, I was mortified with that. And so kept a lot of this sort of in the closet, right? And I don't think I was my real self for quite some time. In mid-career, once I started to share some of my true sort of fears and emotions, even with my colleagues and team members, it actually changed the world for me. One, I felt that I was not lying, because when you're not open, that's exactly what you're doing, right? You're kind of, lying for yourself. You're sort of, hiding something. And that was quite enlightening. It was also quite enlightening for me. It actually changed how my wife and I communicated, how we raised our children and so forth. So I think that, from a personal perspective, that would be what I would do different, is just be much more honest about my strengths and weaknesses.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. Bev?
Yo, now you're just showing off. My God. Thank you so much. Okay, producer Bev, you've got to have a question. I see you've unmuted.
I do, but you've spoken beautifully about a lot of big, sweeping, elemental parts of what you do. I'm going to take it way, way down to something a lot smaller. I've done a lot of hourly hiring, like cattle call hiring. And I'm wondering if, when you are meeting a candidate face-to-face, because there's not a lot of difference when they first walk in, do you have any tells where you think you're going to like this person or not? Because I grew to really like kids that told me they worked with horses for some reason, because you had to be careful. You were shoveling a lot of sugar, and it made me think that's a kid that could handle stuff I needed. So did you have any little tells where you thought, I'm going to like this guy?
Great question, Bev.
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it's more of the questions that they ask and their curiosity is what probably makes me lean towards someone versus, say, more screen. Because one, it's there's a, the curiosity means that they have an interest in not only maybe learning, right? Because I think that you should never stop learning. And secondly, it shows a lot about how they think. And maybe their upbringing and so forth. And it doesn't necessarily mean that there's a right or wrong question. Just the fact that they are curious, to me, is really, really important, because, depending on your upbringing, or which country you come from, your gender, your sexual orientation, we all come out about it, slightly different. And for me, I just look at that as just a golden gem. I mean, I learned so much from those individuals, but it also helps me direct them, to maybe career next steps, and potentially how I approach them, how I communicate with them as well too. I'm not sure if that answers your question or not fully, but if I understood it,
No, it was great.
that's what I would do.
It does, and it also, crosses one of the, what's your out question. It's more of a out philosophy. I mentioned to you earlier, one of the questions we like to ask people is, well, Bev just did it. She's, and by the way, for the viewers and listeners, producer Bev ran a Nordstrom's, and so she did do a lot of hourly hiring. Yeah, right.
Talk about customer service.
Oh my God, if you
Ultimate customer service.
Okay, well, we could clearly go on and on, or at least I know I could, but time is short. So we typically wrap the show up, Joe, with a kind of a for fun. As you know, human resources can be a very interesting and interesting space. You see a lot of things. You see and hear a lot of things in HR that you wouldn't normally see. And so we like to ask the guests, is there a strange story or we'll give the examples of the guy whose pants split and the guy that brought his mom in on the interview to answer the questions. Do you have a anecdotal story you want to share with us that might amuse or entertain the audience?
I think I'm pretty boring. So I'm not quite sure if this would be entertaining or not, but and I haven't had a lot of these unusual experiences, maybe because I've seen so much in my life that nothing seems
that's
unordinary.
By the way,
but there was one where we were hiring at a high volume. We had a massive interview day and went into a conference room, and the conference room was being occupied by someone, but it was already booked for myself and the candidate. And I forcefully, after multiple attempts, kicked out the person. And it ended up being the CEO of the company. So, yeah, it was quite humorous,
career
about a week after.
Yeah.
But I knew who the CEO was. But the CEO had a hat on and had a hoodie, and was on a customer call.
Oh, wow.
And so that was probably one of the most humiliating moments. Good news was that he admired that we prioritized the candidate. And so it ended up working out fine. Wasn't fired. But I'll tell you what, I had some sleepless nights until I had some communication with him, which was about a week later. So that was probably the most humiliating thing that I probably ever experienced.
Joe, that's perfect. And by the way, thank you. I knew you'd be a good guest. I didn't know you would I mean, I did. And the vulnerability, the insights, and the cute anecdotal story is all proof in that. Okay, so Joe, how can people, first of all, thank you, but how can people get in touch with you or connect with you if they hear you and they want to? And we don't have a huge audience yet, so you're not going to get more than 15,000.
Well, I read your cue on this. You said I can actually opt out of this at this one, but I think I'm going to definitely opt out. And the reason being, just in all fairness, my response rate sometimes is quite long, and it wouldn't be fair to the individuals. So
Okay.
I'd rather cut this part out. So
Okay, fair enough. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank you again for all the time, insight, answers, honesty, candor, wisdom. It's been lovely. Thank you so much, Joe, for the
100%.
show. And
thank you. Thanks, producer Bev and William. I really appreciate the opportunity, and let me know if there's anything else I can do to help. And have an awesome weekend.
Joe,
thanks,
we
Joe. Thank
we
you,
learned a
brother.
lot from you today. Thank you so
All right.
much.
Thanks. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Joe.
Thanks for watching this episode of Career Keynotes. For more killer content, please like and subscribe to our channel. We welcome all comments and questions and are grateful for any input regarding future content, topics, and guests. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.